a quick couple measurements and then get started. Thank you. I was starting out. Thanks also, Rouge. It was oddly quiet here, so I figured I would start out just where you can hear the pencil, but I think we're up to 2 or 3 times that my neighbor's blown his nose and then started doing dishes in the first 18 minutes, so may as well just talk so you don't have to listen to that. If it gets quiet enough again, I'll just do some silent drawing for a little bit. The XP still remains to be a mystery, how people get it. I'm assuming since I can hear that so well, y'all can hear it too. But I might have to keep the window open for a little bit. It's a little too warm in here. Thank you. Actually just found, I thought I was almost out of these and I just found one that's completely unsharpened so far. So the Blackwing 71s live on. So it looks like he could come off the page. Hopefully he doesn't. He's Batman. Or my Batman anyway. Batman. The infamous silverware. Everyone take a minute and listen to the neighbor's silverware. Ah, I jinxed it, they stopped. Curious what most people associate Christian Bale with. I guess he's most famous for being one of the Batmen. I think of him as, I don't know, Jack Kelly and Newsies. Or I've been watching Amsterdam a lot lately, and he's great in that. He's easily one of my favorite actors of all time. Also kind of like a real life Bruce Wayne. He's currently funding Girls and Boys foster home in LA that keeps siblings together, which is basically what Bruce Wayne did at the end of his series. Thank you. Trying to balance out getting the full shape done and getting to the point where I can move my reference photo so I don't have to deal with the glare on my screen anymore. Eventually these will be all printed out and I won't have to deal with it at all. Also occurred to me after I finished last night's live drawing that I got caught up talking with everyone in the chat so much that I really lost pace and had to remeasure. So I kind of want to get to the point where I can just focus on building up some depth. Johnny depth. Just kidding. Guess people don't like puns. If anyone's curious about what I'm listening to right now, I kind of changed it up from the playlist that I have had on for most of these. Obviously I can't play it or it'll get pulled for licensing and shut down the live stream, but see if I can get this. It's just the Thomas Newman instrumental piece. It's actually from American Beauty's score and soundtrack, but it sounds really similar to a lot of score that he's done for other films. It's a little bit more meditative. I was kind of noticing that the playlist I've been listening to for the last week or two is sort of worn on me a bit, where I'm skipping over one too many songs, kind of derailing progress. Eventually I'll have playlists listed in the descriptions of these videos so you can hear what I'm listening to. right now for hair, I'm not going to go into too much detail. I'm just going to kind of get some directional texture, and then I'll kind of dip in and out of this because I don't want to spend too much time just on hair at the moment. Thanks. So I think this is day 25 of drawing every day at 5 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. I have 9 more days of drawing at this time, and then I'll have to figure out when I'll be live, but I'm going to try and draw while I'm traveling. Do I think I will do it for over a year or stop? I have no idea. I like the idea of it. I've enjoyed the time. But definitely, I like the structure of drawing daily and having sort of a series to focus on. I think when I first started, because I was doing random drawings every day, and there was a little bit of a chaotic feeling to it, it was a little less zen or relaxing. But now that I've settled into drawing in graphite again, I feel like I'm starting to hit a stride. Speaking of hitting a stride, I ran 6.5 miles today. I've mentioned this in other streams, but I do feel like I draw better when I run. Obviously not at the same time. But I imagine if I made a video of that, people would watch it. You said you would get really, really good if you talked for that long. Probably, hopefully. Ideally, I would get faster at this as well, which I think if I didn't prioritize talking and rambling a bit, I'd probably get through these really quickly. Or maybe not. When I didn't talk at all, and some of the old ones, I literally fell asleep. Which, if anyone wants to figure out where that happened, it's in the live drawing of the panda that I did that's ASMR with a microphone attached to my pen. I fell asleep somewhere, I think, in the second drawing. I think it's the first one that's archived. There's some that I didn't save because I didn't like how the drawings turned out, because I was drawing with a ballpoint pen, and so there's a lot more room for error. Rouge said you're switching between streams again. No worries. I'll be drawing for a while on this one, since I'm just doing the preliminary sketch right now. Thanks. I do paint sometimes. I used to watercolor all the time. But painting is a lot more time consuming. I will paint more at some point, but I kind of wanted to just focus on something that's easier to capture. I should have, I was painting with acrylics and they dry a little too fast for my liking, so I think I'll finish one big piece that I started and then probably paint in oil from that point forward when I do paint. Which, if anybody's interested in that, I could also live stream painting as well. Could be more like a Bob Ross vibe. What I paint people or other things. Probably a bit of both. Like the one I was referring to is a little bit of everything. It's kind of got like a discount Norman Rockwell feel to it. I think one of my favorite modern painters is a guy named Will Rochart, and he's sort of like a Norman Rockwell reincarnated a little bit. Same sensibility, same style. I really like that, but inevitably when you try to emulate anyone else's style, I think like a good sign that it's not something stolen is that it comes out completely different. Sort of putting someone's techniques through your own filter, which is a little bit of what I was doing. That's my favorite painting. Favorite painting of all time is probably, it's hard. I think if I had to really honestly pick one, it would be N.C. Wyeth, Giant in the Clouds. For anyone that doesn't know who that is, he illustrated a lot of famous books. Treasure Island, Robin Hood, things along those lines. But Giant in the Clouds is really cool. I think in general, everything that N.C. Wyeth painted, the clouds are always my favorite part. There's also another one that, if I remember the name correctly, I think it's called The Hunter. That's N.C. Wyeth, and it's Robin Hood and there's merry men, and they're stalking a deer. They're kind of peering through the dark woods. It's really cool. I think drawing mustaches is probably one of my specialties because I've seen one in the mirror every day for so long. Especially if it's like this, like kind of a messy Sam Elliott mustache. Will I ever draw animals like when I drew the panda? Probably. I've drawn a lot of animals. Not so much in graphite. I've drawn most of them in pen, which I showed a little bit yesterday. I don't know if Rouge is still in the chat, but she mentioned that her family had cattle when I showed one of my favorite drawings that I did of a bull that ended J.B. Mooney's career. Oh yeah, the drawing of Zissou. Yep. Thanks. Yeah, that one is also a ballpoint pen. That's just a $10 Parker Jotter pen. Good for travel. Good for sketching. That's something if people are wanting to know about like what I like to draw with in terms of pens. Parker Jotters are a little bit more viscous ink than Bic, so they're kind of messy, and you can sketch a little bit with those. Do I like drawing or painting? We're drawing for sure. It's less, not effort, but less of a setup. It's something that I can, even with this large portfolio, if I want to go sit somewhere in public and draw, I can just pack it into a bag, carry it under my arm. If I did that with a painting, I'd ruin my shirts. And there's something about the simplicity of it that I like. Or just the idea that I could throw any of my journals into a bag, or a jacket pocket, or a back pocket. I like drawing with pencils more, but for the last year or so I've drawn a lot more in ink, which I think, as frustrating as that can be because the failure rate is much higher, more room for error, I think that it's probably improved my art substantially faster than drawing in pencil all the time. So every once in a while, I think if I feel like I'm slacking or sort of losing touch, I'll do pen drawings. I also have one too many pens to not draw with them anymore. Gotta empty my sharpener real quick. Do I use erasers a lot, or fix your mistakes if you ever make mistakes? Yeah. Erasers, I think, are a misused tool. Even though I do use them to fix the many mistakes I make. Eraser, if used appropriately, you can actually do quite a bit more depth work in terms of adding more depth and contour to your drawing with an eraser than you can with a pencil sometimes. Which is why I like the square erasers on the Blackwing pencils like this, or the mono eraser, because you can get a really fine point. You can add highlights in here, or sort of lift lighter parts where there's reflective spots on skin, like the tips of noses or the reflective spots in eyes. Yeah, mistakes in drawing, I think, are the only way you learn. Like this one in particular, I moved his eyes down yesterday because I drew him too high. I've done that twice in 2 weeks on different portraits, which is a good thing to, if anyone's learning how to draw. It's something that's really rarely talked about in art lessons, is taking periodic breaks to look at your art from different depths. For this in particular, since I'm doing a top-down capture with my camera, I have to continually look and see what it looks like to everyone watching rather than where I am, because I'm over on this side looking past where my phone is mounted, which I have occasionally drawn them where they look great from where I'm sitting, and then I lean up and it looks like somebody's squashing their face a little. You have to kind of gain not just perspective, but you have to really evaluate, if you're aiming to draw photoreal portraits, what you can improve on, even if it's nudging the hairline down or up, or adjusting. And sometimes you can fix that by adding depth in certain areas if it's too flat, or sometimes you just have to erase it. You wonder if no one is definitely not in the chat yet. He usually says I have returned when he shows up. So he might pop in a little bit. I think he usually jumps in after like an hour or so. It's my favorite part of drawing. Usually when I finish one, I think, especially if I've accomplished what I set out to draw. It's just kind of one more to add to the ever-growing pile of confirmation that I've acquired a skill set I always wanted. It's something I used to do when I made music videos. If I ever felt like I had like a little bit of imposter syndrome or anything like that, I would go back and look at things that I liked that I made in the past, just to kind of refresh that I had, accomplished at least finishing something that I liked. But the process overall, I usually enjoy most of it. I don't love drawing hair as much. Maybe it's like a Freudian resentment or something, but I think like the tedium of drawing hair is a little bit much sometimes. But in light of that, I keep choosing subjects that have a lot of hair and beards, so it's really on me. Do I like animating more or drawing more? Drawing more. Animating takes too long, and in the many years that I did that for various artists and bands, I can count, I don't even need a whole hand to count the projects where people were not going to ask me for 1,000 changes that would take forever and then expect me to do it with no additional budget or time. There's a common misconception with animation that since it's not being captured on a camera, unless it's 2D hand animation, which I've done a lot of, there's a misconception that you can make anything, which you can, but not on a tight budget and really quick turnaround. And usually when people are giving notes, it's not necessarily to improve, it's just so they can add to the conversation, which they don't realize would add countless hours to my workload and usually kind of degrade the quality of what I'd already created. I think even animating stuff for myself, I get tired of it. Just too many years of, too many hours sitting in a chair or staying up late and animating, whereas with a drawing I can close the book and come back to it and not lose any quality or, get a faster result. With like, say if I did a commission drawing and somebody wasn't exactly happy with it, they could tell me what they didn't like or want, and I can adjust that. It takes me a pretty little amount of time by comparison. think also, since so many people are using AI and really lazy automated keyframing for animation, that there's a whole wave of really bad animation that's kind of flooded most markets. And it kind of, in the same way that people say a rising tide benefits all ships, it's sort of the opposite effect with animation. Yeah, AI is it's interesting. I mean, I think there are uses for it, but as per usual with any sort of invention like that or development in technology, it's usually used for the wrong reasons. But I mean, I've played with it just out of curiosity to see how easy it would be to recreate something I can make by hand, whether it's a drawing or a painting or elements of animation. And honestly, if somebody offered the right budget and timeline for animation, I'd probably use something AI related to make elements of it, but I'd still animate the rest by myself. One thing I do like is that for someone that I get a little bit of a like analysis paralysis when I have to do administrative stuff. So if I'm working on a creative project and I have to stop and type up a bunch of emails and have like a whole correspondence where I have to turn off the creative engine a bit, I mean like not a AI engine, but my brain, where I have to be logical, and it kind of stops the creative flow. And so I like that I can task AI with just, I can copy paste what a person said and tell it what I want it to say roughly without having to edit, and it'll do it for me. I kind of like the idea of that, like a Jarvis or a Friday, if anyone knows that reference. You know, I do kind of wish I had an earpiece where I could tell like a virtual assistant, hey, can you do this, this, and that for me? Like a very Tony Stark thing, but you know, to my point, even then, Tony Stark created an AI that is basically the whole narrative of whatever the worst Avengers movie was. Can't remember the name of that one. So I use sharpeners a lot. I do when I'm drawing like this. That's the Blackwing two-step sharpener, which I think it works well in the sense that it makes them sharp, but for the type of drawing that I do, they don't hold an edge for very long. And so it really goes through my pencils really quickly because it cuts away all the excess wood to give the signature Blackwing long tip. I like when I think about the AI stuff, I also think about years ago when I was playing music for a living, there were bands that would use tracks for certain elements, so they would have their live show basically matching what their album sounded like, and they would use tracks from the album. A good example is St. Vincent when she was doing less of her like, look at me, I'm David Bowie shows, and her band was actually all really great and really playing well, and it was more focused on kind of like the cohesiveness of the band. Like the song Marrow, there's a couple of them. There's a lot of symphonic and orchestral tracks on that album, and actually one of my friends, Alex, recorded, he was one of the engineers on that with John Congleton, and they made her live tracks. So the drummer, who was a really talented drummer, had a sample kit, and he played essentially like AI recreations of live orchestral sounds on stage, and I feel like a lot of people hated that at first because it wasn't live, but to me that was kind of like where tracks and AI and all that started to really enter into music. But I've seen a lot of artists do that. Gaz Coombs is another one. He's the lead singer of Supergrass. And I watched from Side Stage his drummer use not just sample pads of things from the album, but also he had arpeggiators like on synthesizers, on like keyboards, with a sequencer. And so he would play a chord and then hit a few things and it would randomize the sequence and it would create something that wasn't on the album but was similar to it. But if a human had to recreate that by hand, it would take forever. You'd have to deconstruct it or have it transcribed to figure out how to play that. So there's uses for technology like that I don't mind. There's a video floating around of Rick Beato showing how fast a pro level AI engine can generate a band. And obviously that band will never play a live show, but the genre they chose, I feel like I wouldn't mind that genre being wiped out by AI bands. But yeah, in general though, I think for most of its uses, it's no good. How long have you been drawing for? Well, I've always drawn for as long as I can remember, and it's taken on different forms. Years ago, I used to do references where I was doing light tracing, essentially with a image projected through the paper, and I would go in and get the shapes all right, and then color those with Prismacolors or markers. And I've done every sort of Microsoft Paint and all those from all the years past, where I would draw on like a little tablet and it would translate it to the computer. And I've always carried a journal and a little sketchbook when I used to tour for a living, so I've always drawn both as a kid and an adult. And but in this style and with more photo accuracy, I've been doing this for a couple years. I've drawn daily for the last 3.5 years, which is the most consistently that I've drawn. But I mentioned this the other day. If anyone is on here from then, you're gonna hear it again. But I used to do little like doodles and I would basically like draw out ideas for videos, not exactly animatics and not, I'm blanking on the term because I'm focused on the hair right here. It'll come to me here in a second, but I used to draw those all the time when I traveled, or if there was something like we stayed in extended stay hotels and those always smelled like cigarettes, and one of them we stayed in Ohio smelled like a fish tank and cigarettes, and I drew a fish smoking a cigarette. And that was probably 11 years ago, something like that. And I'd color them with Prismacolors or whatever, but I prefer more of like a photoreal graphite drawing. And I've been doing this. I started doing it on a grid so I could measure things out to be really exact. But it was so time consuming that even doing what I've done just during this live stream would have taken me the better part of a day. And I'd have to go in and erase a bunch of the guidelines. And I didn't really love that style or process. But I've been really focused on portraits for the last 1.5 years or 2 years. Before that, I was drawing more like urban sketch of like buildings and things more along those lines, architectural. but I don't know. It didn't keep my interest very well because drawing a building doesn't really, unless it resonates with people because they've seen that actual building or they like the style, it kind of falls flat for me as well. Do I ever draw trees? I have before. Sometimes, like when I was teaching a student how to draw a tree more accurately, just looking at the tree and sitting there, I would draw those. And at the time, he was wanting to learn how to draw with a fountain pen, and so I would do an exercise where he would draw one tree kind of small, and then I'd do a line and draw a graph and make him size that tree up gradually, and then I would do the same as an example, both in fountain ink and graphite. I don't think I've drawn trees since then. Trees are kind of similar to hair. The more time you spend on them, the more they look realistic, but it's very tedious. Tedious. Have I ever painted a tree? I've painted many trees. In the painting I was talking about earlier, there's big clusters of trees. Probably watercolor between the two. Acrylic is cool and fun sometimes, but watercolor is a little more forgiving. And I dry brush when I watercolor, so I will get the color exactly how I want it because I mix them individually. And then I get the brush pretty well saturated in it, and then I get all of the excess water off of the brush so I can kind of push the paint around a little bit on the page and not have a runny painting. Do a lot of people watch my live streams? Not usually all at once. I try not to pay attention to it until I look at the stats afterwards. I feel like it kind of jinxes it because the few times I've had slightly higher numbers, I'll start paying attention to that and then they disappear. point, in fact, right there. We went from 10 to 6. I think a lot of people obsess over the numbers, which it's good to track those things, but I try not to think about it, especially in the moment. Have I tried to sell my drawings? A little bit. I've done commissions for people, and I have sold, actually in the store that I used to work in, there was art that I had in there that was on display that I sold to a customer and then got in trouble for it. But yes, in general, yeah. That's one I still think about. These people wanted to buy the art and the frame it was in. And the manager of the store, even though they were using my art as a display to sell paint and paint supplies, freaked out. And then I got reprimanded for it. But I did sell it. And they're very sweet people, so it was cool to see art go to the people that were really nice. Have I ever drawn a cat? Yes, I have. I've drawn a few cats. Alright, I'm at the point now where I can move my reference photo, so I don't have to deal with the glare on my screen anymore. So give me a minute, I'm gonna shift things around. Okay, so this is kind of my favorite part of the drawing phase, just because it allows me to not have to look at a glare on my screen since I haven't started printing references yet. Just basically torn on which printer scanner I want to get. And also don't necessarily know that I want to combine the two, because if I get the scanner I used to have, then I can have better scans of my photos and my art, but then I'd have to have a printer and a scanner. Sorry for the noise. It's that time of day when everyone in the building starts making a ton of noise. The best space for my little art studio office in our apartment is unfortunately next to some of the water lines, so I can hear pretty much anytime someone turns water on. And it is also up against the kitchen walls, so if somebody washes dishes, it's doubly loud. Which is pretty much the only reason I don't mark these as ASMR videos. But at the beginning of this, it was oddly quiet here, so I just tried to draw for as long as I could so you could hear the pencil. But we're officially at that time of day where all the neighbors are living, so. enjoyed drawing with these Pentels lately, but just to get a little bit of a finer line in here. I don't know if y'all can hear that. Sounds like our neighbor went to the store and didn't get her pepper. That's what she's yelling about out there. The guy took it out of the bag and then didn't put it back in after he scanned it, is what she's screaming about. It's the really exciting things about living this close to everyone's windows. And compared to yesterday, I had mentioned in yesterday's stream that I didn't run and didn't really get a workout, like an intentional rest day, and it felt like I had no energy or focus. By comparison, I ran 6.5 miles today and I feel like I have a ton of energy and focus, but my knees do hurt. Yeah, it's one of those days with a bunch of questions, which I don't ever mind. It's been a pretty slow day in terms of interaction otherwise, though. It's usually kind of like that on Thursdays. Which, I mentioned this earlier, but today is the 25th day I've drawn in a row on a live stream at 5 p.m. And I have 9 more days on that schedule. And then I'm doing a bit of traveling, so I will be live streaming still, but not exactly sure of the time. But my goal is to draw some of the people I meet while I travel, so less recognizable faces. And they'll be smaller, so a little bit of a format change. But I imagine we'll kind of shake things up a little bit in terms of who's watching, because it'll be at different times. So I'll probably catch, I'm guessing I'll catch a lot more of the European crowd since I'll be over there. So I'll be more on their timeline instead of like right now in the middle of the night over there. But yeah, I think this is the first day in the last several where Nolan and Bossatron and trying to think who else. Travis haven't been popping up in here, which usually they kind of take over the chat a little bit, so thank you. And it's really like his hairline is nuts. It's also nice because the last drawing was a wig, so it had kind of an unrealistic line to it, even though it was really straight. It just felt weird, which is why I think people kept saying the forehead looked like Val Kilmer, because it was just like a big square thing. It's already got a little bit of a glare on it, which is why it looks so white. So I need to go in and add some individual texture. I think oddly, when I'm drawing, even though some people like ASMR, I notice that more people hang around when I'm rambling, which I kind of prefer drawing when I'm able to talk a bit more. So I've started these out with silent drawings and it just feels really boring. It's funny, I start talking and then for the first time it drops down to 0. I'm trying to think of all my favorite movies that he's been in. It's actually quite a few. I think Amsterdam is one of my all-time favorites, which I've actually been watching this week. If I can't think of something to put on, I'll just put that. I think as far as actors go, he's one of the few people that's able to jump in and out of really serious scenarios and then also make you laugh or tear up. In Amsterdam, he does that quite a bit. Even though it's not exactly a comedy, it has a lot of funny moments. I think most people think of him, other than being Batman, they think of him as the guy that loses a ton of weight and puts on weight and all those things. But I feel like that's only just a detail of how he acts. So much of his stuff is that he's just a total chameleon in terms of personality and delivery. I think the first thing I ever saw him in was Newsies, which I don't really like musicals, but that film, for whatever reason, really one of my all-time favorites. I'm gonna close the window, that's gonna make me mad. And then I mentioned this film the other day. I actually really liked Ford versus Ferrari. I think like the one detail where they really missed the mark on that, other than the story not being totally accurate. Apparently Leo Beebe, the guy that they kind of painted as the sort of bad guy of the movie, I think that actor's name is Josh Lucas. Aside from that being slightly historically inaccurate, a lot of it was really accurate, and I think they really kind of missed on the music aspect. Because, if I'm not mistaken, that's a Mangold movie, and he's worked with T-Bone Burnett, who I mention all the time, because he's one of the greatest music supervisors on any film or show, and has really made a lasting mark as a music supervisor. If I'm not mistaken, I'm pretty sure he was the music supervisor for True Detective, but he definitely was for Crazy Heart, for Walk the Line. James Mangold, who made Walk the Line, also made Ford versus Ferrari. But they went with like really bad sort of like electric guitar sound effects for a lot of the races. There's a thing that I always think about that Randy Newman, who's one of my all-time favorite writers. If you have no reference point for who that is, yes, that is the guy that wrote the Toy Story song, but many, many other great songs. Randy Newman co-wrote Three Amigos, Steve Martin, Martin Short, and Chevy Chase. And when they asked him if he would do the score, he said yes. And then they asked him what he would write, and he said, well, it's all going to be on guitar or a harmonica because it's a movie about guys out in the desert and on the open plains, and there wouldn't be a piano out there. I've always remembered him saying that because he made a point to say that the music should fit what's actually happening in the film. And although they're in race cars, and going back to Ford versus Ferrari, although they are in race cars, it didn't feel right that sort of modern electric guitar was being played over it. That style of guitar didn't exist until the 80s. And it just kind of, I think, stole from the overall impact of the Ken Miles story, because that's really what it was. It was a more of a focus on Ken Miles told through Carroll Shelby's perspective, because it didn't even really give Carroll Shelby's story. He had a crazy life, and they only gave glimpses of that. But if you ever read anything about Ken Miles, who Christian Bale played, he was pretty accurate. Thick accent, always said the wrong thing, pissed off a lot of people, and won a great deal of races and changed racing forever. But yeah, the music on that film is just not great. And I don't mean the soundtrack, I mean the score. If you don't know the difference of soundtrack and score, soundtrack is like already established famous songs, like bands, like something you hear on the radio. The score is the music that's written for the film, and the score is what I have a problem with. I liked that film a lot. It was a little long, but the casting was great. Tracy Letts was a perfect choice. Junior. I also think that one of the best modern films ever made. I mean, Christopher Nolan is one of the greatest, but I think that so many people, when they think of him now, they think of like Oppenheimer and Batman. But his early stuff, obviously Memento's great, but his very first feature length is called Following, and that's a great sort of film noir, black and white film. And I think The Prestige is maybe one of the great modern films in general. That's a good example. I think that anytime a film is made in a certain era, the music should reflect that era. It's kind of why I don't like Baz Luhrmann's movies. It seems like they added everything on some sort of amphetamine. Like his movies kind of feel like, and then we should do this, and then this, and then this, and then this. But he plays modern music in films like Great Gatsby. I thought it would be interesting to retell it. It doesn't feel like a remake, even though it is. It's just another telling of the novel, but the novel is pretty succinct. So if you deviate from the story too much, it's no longer The Great Gatsby. But they lost me with all the modern music and the allusions with an A, not an I, to a different time. And I feel like a lot of films do that. And there's films I love that do that as well. I think Django Unchained is a great film. I remember seeing it in theaters, and that's one of the ones that I remember, everything about the experience because I was at Alamo Drafthouse in Austin. But I will say, as soon as it dips into modern music, they lose me a bit. I feel like an involuntary eye roll happens. And it's not a dislike of that music, it's just that I want it to stay in that time. It takes me out of the movie. My disbelief, the suspension of disbelief, it's traditionally a spaghetti western, just kind of, it like floods back the fact that I'm watching a movie. I'm no longer in the story because now it's rap, you know, or whatever you want, whatever example you want to give. That was also like in Sinners was one recently that did it where I feel like that's the closest someone has gotten to making an allusion to a different time or culture, not totally leaving the quality of the film like on the floor. I didn't dislike it, but I also it didn't hit for me, which I saw a lot of people were saying that was one of their favorite parts of the movie. Which, fair play, we all have our opinions. Um, but a good example of staying within the timeline is Prestige. The only exception to that really is that they play a Tom York song over the credits. But they chose that mainly for the lyrics of that song, which was on the Eraser album. It's a great album if anyone's looking for something to listen to. I think Prestige is one of my all-time favorites. Not just that Christian Bale's in, just in general. And then I wouldn't say that I love The Boxer, but that is a great film. That's one that I can watch about once a year. That's one where Christian Bale is both likable and unlikable at different parts of the story. I feel like it's another one of his strong suits is that you can play people that you absolutely despise and then turn around and be someone you're kind of rooting for all of a sudden. There's kind of a duality to that that most actors don't really have. And I think a lot of actors, anytime that happens, it's more dependent on the editing of the film. Whereas he seems to be able to do it within a scene. And then there's the Scott Cooper films that he's in. Those are great as well. I've talked about it a little bit. I couldn't remember the name the other day, but the movie I was talking about was called Hostiles. And that's one, I'm pretty sure it's him. I've seen interviews where actors said that certain people in the film were method, meaning that they didn't bathe at all for the entire film. And I'm pretty sure he was referring to Christian Bale. I think it was probably him and Rory Cochrane that were doing that. And one of my old buddies is actually in that film. It's a guy who some of my band stuff overlapped with. And I said this the other day, but it's one of the few films he's in where I can actually watch it and not just feel like I'm looking at somebody I know. And maybe one of the greatest, spoiler, one of the greatest death scenes in a Western. But if anyone's taken that recommendation, fair warning, it is a dark movie. It was actually the second time I've drawn Christian Bale, but first time this size and from different reference photos. The other one was a lot smaller, and it was when I was very first learning the scribble method with pen. So it was a completely different feel. And I think the other Scott Cooper movie that he was in was The Pale Blue Eye, which I didn't really like at first, and then I went back and watched it again, and I really appreciated it. I think it is one of those movies that is unfortunately better the second time you watch it, so I think that it got kind of underrated reviews because most people saw it and took it on that first reaction. It's also interesting because he's been in so many things. I mean, he started acting as a kid in, what's it called? It's the Spielberg film where he's during the war. Empire, or Emperor of the Sun. Can't remember. I'll have to look it up. I feel like he's just kind of been around forever, but didn't really get to this level of fame until the last 15, 20 years, which is a long time, but for having been doing it since he was a young kid is pretty wild. I also like that anytime there's like photos of him, he's kind of like the anti-paparazzi guy because he doesn't do anything sketchy, but he always has an old late 90s model Toyota Tacoma. It's like my kind of guy. No flashy car. And then I mentioned this earlier, but he's kind of like fully embodying the whole Bruce Wayne thing now, because he's building a foster facility for kids in, I think, LA, and the whole goal of it is that so siblings don't get separated, which I've heard him talk about a little bit and saw some of like the plans that they were talking about. It seems really cool. I think it's one of those things when you like an actor and then you find out that they're actually doing cool stuff in the world, it makes them even more interesting. And if I'm not mistaken, I think he's the new Frankenstein's monster, which is also, I think, worth distinguishing. Frankenstein is the doctor. If people haven't read the book or paid attention in the thousands of movies they've made about it. Not thousands, but it seems like they do a new one every few years. It's Dr. Frankenstein, and his monster is what they call Frankenstein. But often if you look around like a costume store around Halloween, Frankenstein is a green dude with bolts in his neck. It's usually mislabeled. It's kind of like the same distinction of Jekyll and Hyde. He's Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde, because when he's a monster, he's no longer a doctor. There's also a really funny interview that I think about in terms of Christian Bale, where I forget what late night show host it was, but they're talking to Michael Caine, and obviously Michael Caine's worked with him not just in all 3 Batman movies, but in Prestige. And he mentioned that Christian Bale got a bad rap for yelling during filming Terminator, and then he said that the only difference between him and Christian Bale is that when he used to yell and freak out and have big arguments on set is that no one was recording. And then Michael Caine said that he did one once. It was about 45 minutes. And he said that that was really common when you're under a lot of pressure and stress and people aren't taking your role seriously. Which I kind of never cared about that. It's sort of one of those things where if you really think about that role, they were asking him to play someone who's under an immense amount of stress. I don't know that he's traditionally a method actor, but I know that there's quite a few films where he is. So I imagine that had something to do with it. I think what's more impressive about that is that he never lost his accent when he was yelling. Pretty much stayed in character. Oh, thanks. Yeah, this one, I started it last night, but I only did the nose and the eyes last night. So most of this progress is from just now. Been going for 2 hours tonight so far. I'll take just a quick water break. Oh, thanks. Yeah, this is Christian Bale, but it's I actually don't know when it's from. This is from a photo shoot he did for a magazine, I think only a few years ago. But there's been a few films where he's had quite a bit of facial hair, so it might have been closer to the time when he did Hostiles, the one I was trying to remember the other night. Which, after drawing the Brad Pitt with no facial hair and having to kind of slowly scoot his dimensions in the whole time, I wanted to draw someone that had a beard again. Just makes mapping things out a little easier, so for the sake of the live streams when I can't hover directly over my paper, it's nice to have some like markers on the face to work with. Yeah, this whole thing is in pencil. It's other than a few hairs and the mustache and the beard, it's all with this pencil, the Blackwing 71, which I'm almost out of these pencils, so I might have to break down and get one of the other series that they make. I did find a completely unsharpened one earlier though, so that was nice. So you said insane detail. Should look into being a surgeon. No thanks. I'm not a fan of hospitals. I mean, nothing against them, but I worked in one when I was younger, and never again. This is kind of one of those parts of the process where you just have to trust it, because since I don't want to leave anything bare on the face, I have to just start adding contour everywhere. Always feels a little bit odd at first, but it makes sense when you see the final product. Have I ever drawn Clint Eastwood? Not yet. That's a good suggestion, though. I've said it a few times before, but I like to draw people that have lined faces. If they don't have facial hair, then a lined face is another really great option. Kind of, I used to love Clint Eastwood. I never really, like, I never deep dived a ton of his movies. They were just kind of idly on in the background growing up. But that's one of those ones I think about going back and kind of rewatching start to finish. I mean, maybe I don't need to see Trouble with the Curve ever again, but like his early Western stuff. It's got to be tough being his son, I would imagine, for, what's his name? Is it Scott Eastwood? Also an actor, but obviously not quite at the level his dad is. He's in Fury. I think maybe you and I were talking about this the other night, but in Fury, he's the one that spits on the back of their tank, and on set, Shia LaBeouf and Brad Pitt jumped off the tank and started fist fighting with him. And then he told him that David Ayers told him to do it because it's a sign of respect. Like, it's good luck to spit on a tank when you're in the infantry. And then he's got, spoiler alert, and I mean it is a war movie, but he's got kind of a bummer of a exit scene. Sort of I don't know, like it's not like a big moment of focus, which is a little bit weird. Yeah, early Clint stuff was great. I kind of have like an aversion to elder Clint, you know? Like there's definitely some moments, but I don't know, I think he kind of lost the touch a little bit. And then a lot of actors talk about how he's notorious for only doing one take when he directs. And I know that a lot of people really celebrate that, but I feel like you can tell when you watch some of those movies, you can tell that it's like they should have done another take. Like that was weird. Trouble with the Curve is a great example. That movie has a few odd moments. There's a film, I'm pretty sure, I don't know if he directed it or not. I'd have to look it up, but it's him and Kevin Costner, and Eastwood plays like the U.S. Marshal or whatever law enforcement guy, and Costner is kind of the main character. And I'm trying to remember the name of that one. I remember it being a great film. I was a kid when it came out, so it's pretty old now, but it'll come back to me. It's basically like Man on the Run type thing, and Costner is kind of in a not a typical role for him, meaning that he's not playing baseball or being a cowboy or diving into the ocean. Yeah, if I can remember the name, I'll call it out. But man, that was a good movie. There's this great line in there where uh, it's like him and a kid cruising in this car, because I want to say it's in like the 50s or 60s. They're in this great old car, and he is talking about what it's like to be in a car, and he was like, "We see we're in a time machine," and he points in the rearview mirror. He says, "That behind us, that's the past." It's just like like whoever wrote it really did a great job on that, and then the film is just really well made. Which I'm not anti-Costner. I feel like a lot of people sort of knock him after the whole Taylor Sheridan fallout, but I think Taylor Sheridan's kind of a tool. I don't know if anyone's like a real diehard fan of him, but I think the best thing he did was the first film that he made, and then since then it's been diminishing returns. Like Hell or High Water is a great film, mainly because of the cast. I mean, you can't go wrong with Chris Pine and Ben Foster and Jeff Bridges. And oh man, what's his name? Completely blank. And he's in a few Sheridan things. He's in like Yellowstone and Wind River and all that stuff. But that's a great movie. I think it's largely carried by the cast. You could have the exact same dialogue by less experienced or less charming actors, and it wouldn't come off as good. And then I think it's Wind River is the other one, something like that. It's Jeremy Renner, and it sort of seems like they did it on their 6-month break from Marvel, because it's him and Elizabeth. A Perfect World. Yeah, that's the one. Man, I'm drawing a blank on everyone's names. Oh, Elizabeth Olsen. She's one of the other main characters in it. That's a decent Taylor Sheridan thing, but otherwise, I feel like that guy just turns out garbage, and people are told to celebrate it. Like Yellowstone is one of the worst show endings I think I've ever seen. Just like some charming actors, and I mean, it's. I heard the interview with Tarantino where he said Yellowstone was the greatest like soap opera he's ever watched, but he couldn't tell you what happened because as soon as he watched it, he forgot it. And then I think 1923 is maybe one of the most poorly handled properties of any show ever. Like I still don't understand what people saw in it. I watched every bit of it and just felt like bad writing on top of bad writing. And then it's like, what? It's real. It's what life was really like. It's like I could tell you a lot of stories that I've read that are true stories where it didn't quite work out like that. And, you know, I just feel like if you're gonna make that kind of a show, for one, maybe don't steal so blatantly. Like it's clearly just taken from Legends of the Fall, Ghost in the Darkness, Titanic. It's like, it seems kind of like they had a writer's room where they wrote everything that they liked from 90s movies. And then they're like, let's take a bit of this and a bit of that. But I'm definitely in the camp of people that was like frustrated with that second season. Like, what a waste of cast. Like, even like Harrison Ford, I feel like I was confused why some people. I mean, I guess obviously they're contracted into it, and the first season was alright, but they had like one of the greatest casts ever if you look at it on paper, and it's a pretty awful show. It's kind of like that thing, like Taylor Sheridan really slammed Costner, but also like he's a film star. You know, he wants to direct and make his own films. He was only supposed to be in the first season, so I don't know. I feel like that's kind of like standard procedure. Took too long. Got to wrap it up. Anyway, back to rambling again. I think also like 1883 was one of those ones that was a really poorly executed property as well. I think they relied too much on the same plot line over and over and over. And really, it was just the scenery that changes. I imagine before they all step on set, because I'm sure they shot it out of order, they're all like, wait, are we fighting or are we getting along at this point? And it's just like day after day of that question because it really comes through in all the acting. And then I don't know why this stuck with me, but there was an interview, I think it was Mark Maron or something, but Sam Elliott said that the one thing he asked them was make sure my hat fits. And he showed up and they had this hat that they picked out for him. And he was like, this doesn't fit, it's going to fall off my head. And he said, if you look close on every scene where he's riding anything above like a trot, he's having to hold his hat on. Just blows my mind that it's like, you know how many hat makers there are? Like, it'd be so easy to just take this guy and go get a different hat. Yeah, I agree. Like, Unforgiven is one of the greatest westerns of all time. I think why I don't really, I wouldn't say I care, but why I have those opinions is because I kept hearing about how you have to watch them and they're the greatest Western shows and blah, blah, blah. And I grew up in West Texas, you know, so it reads a little different to me because it's like, that's not like what I grew up around, you know, and when half of the dialogue, it's like Yellowstone is a good example. Half of the dialogue is about what it is to be a cowboy. I don't know that I ever heard anyone ever talk about being a cowboy because that's just what they all were, you know? Like, it's like if you have dinner with a bunch of construction workers, they don't preface every sentence, well, you know, as a construction worker, like, we get it, they're cowboys. Like, do something else. They have a real dialogue. I think also there's like one character in there whose dad is a really famous actor. It's Michael Landon from Little House on the Prairie. She played that character Teeter, and that's maybe one of the worst bad cartoon accents I've ever heard. And you can tell everyone has to act like they can't understand her, and it's inconsistent. And like, my wife is from the Arklatex, which is where she's meant to be from, basically like northeastern Texas or northwestern Louisiana, and I've never heard anyone that sounds even remotely close to that. Even the people that have thick accents, it's like if they wanted her to be like that, make her Cajun or something, or like I don't know, say that she got kicked in the head by a horse, but as soon as that accent popped up, I was out. Um, but I don't know, I just feel like it's just kind of lots of bad tropes and lots of bad speeches. And, you know, it's a shame because there's a lot of talented people in it. It's not a knock on the cast. It's more so the what were they thinking in the production, the writing room, and then like the preachiness of everything. I mean, and there's stuff in there. They're not wrong. They're right about a lot of stuff. Like there's all this stuff about, you know, how hard it is to farm certain things and what that does to the land and the agriculture, like the wildlife around it and all that. But the way that it's delivered, it's like it's so heavy-handed. It makes it seem like they're bad actors, but it's just bad writing. Which is funny because Taylor Sheridan came from, like, his first big acting role was Sons of Anarchy, which was another kind of mishandled property. Back in the day, one of the bands that I was in, we had a couple placements on it, so I was like really adamant about watching it because I wanted to see like where the songs were going to pop up. It's exciting, you know. I was like, oh, that's cool. You know, you hear stuff that I've done on there or whatever. And I was really invested in it for that reason. And then I kind of got sucked into the show. But there's like something that you can't, like, I can't really take them seriously because it's bikers that don't cuss. So there's like a fundamental issue there. But then also, everything that Taylor Sheridan acted, he acts like he's reading dialogue. He doesn't use contractions. So he doesn't even say like y'all or them, or not that them is a contraction, but he has to speak in full intact sentences and over articulate all the time, and it's kind of like the hallmark of a bad actor, I think. And he asked to be written off the show and then didn't like how they wrote him off the show and threw a fit. And then went and made a couple good things, and that's propped him up. But I don't know. Kurt Sutter is someone I don't really like either, the guy that created Sons of Anarchy. It's these dudes who are kind of making something as if people haven't already seen other biker things and westerns. Yeah, I would never be a film or a TV critic, but I definitely have the opinions for it. And once upon a time wanted to be in that world of writing and directing. But the more I've like dabbled with it and talked or worked with people that are really in that world, it's less and less appealing. I feel like so many films and shows are kind of what remained after it got totally overhauled by the production company for wanting something else. I think that's why it's so rare to get like great films now. I always think about David Fincher when I think about production companies really messing up movies, because his first major film was Aliens 3, which everyone kind of talks about how that's one of the worst ones. And he basically turned in a cut of the film, and they were like, we want more of a chase scene in the end. And that happened over and over and over, and they're like, we want way more of a chase. And so if you watch that movie, there's about a half hour of them running in and out of hallways. And that was like his way of saying, like, this is the only way I can give you what you want because it doesn't make sense with the story. And so there's just tons and tons of footage of them basically like Benny Hill running from hallway to hallway, like in and out of corridors and stuff, when it probably would have been fine if it was a 2-hour movie or whatever he wanted originally. Not that that was a great film in any way, but you know, you kind of have it, you're teed up when you have an alien property. I mean, just like the new show Alien Earth is not great, but it's alien, so they can really dip into a deep well to kind of make those something. Same guy that did Fight Club, yeah, Fincher. That was his first feature film. Yeah, he did Fight Club, Seven, Benjamin Button. What's the? It's the girl who kicked or the girl with the dragon tattoo or whatever. He did the American or the English version with Daniel Craig, which is actually a great version, even though I like the other ones a little more. He also did The Game, which if you ever watch, so when they have the first fight in Fight Club, when it's the part when he's like, hit me, and he's like, you just want me to hit you? And he's like, yeah. And he's like, where? And he's like, I don't know, surprise me. And then he punches him in the ear. When it cuts to him saying, oh, you hit me in the ear. And he's like, sorry, man, I fucked it up or whatever. And he's like, no, it was perfect. Then he punches him in the chest. Behind them is the car that is in The Game, or vice versa. There's a car that's in both movies, and it has the same bumper sticker and everything. Yeah, Seven is one of the best films. It's brutal, but it's so good. That's another one. People usually get this story wrong, but Brad Pitt, because there's a director's cut that exists of that you have to basically buy, I think, on DVD, where it shows what's in the box, like a glimpse of it. And Brad Pitt was the one who said we shouldn't show it. And the film company was like in agreement about that. But there are all these things attached to that movie legally that was basically like Fincher and Pitt being on the same side against the production company. But that originally was supposed to be Denzel Washington, not. I don't know if he was going to be Morgan Freeman or Brad Pitt, but it went to him first, and he said it was too dark and didn't know like what he would do with it. And then he's later in interviews said that he regretted not taking it because he realized what it was once he started like seeing how masterfully it was put together. But Fincher is that way with a lot of stuff. Oh, Zodiac is the other one I was trying to think. That's one of my all-time favorite movies, is Zodiac, which like we live in San Francisco, so I have been to a lot of those locations just because you can. I mean, the city's really small, so you can really just walk around and it's like, this is where the cab thing happened. It's kind of nuts. I've read the Graysmith books and all the stuff that Zodiac's based on. But with Fight Club in particular, there's lines that are in the book that just it would make it like an X-rated movie. It's stuff that Marla says. And Fincher was told by the production company there's no way she can say that, and so he shot 2 alternatives, or I think it was 2, and one of them was basically so bad that it was like unrateable, and he shot it that way to get one of her like really awful lines in there, and basically propped it up where they knew that the film company would say no to the other one. But he's a crazy director. He's notorious for doing 150 plus takes with some people to get them truly exhausted, like the full-on Kubrick method, and kind of moves people around like set pieces. So if he doesn't like the blocking of a shot or how fast someone enters or how slow they enter, then he'll call cut. And then he's a big proponent for shooting on digital now, and they'll do 155 takes or whatever it is, and then he'll like the very last take and he'll say, okay, print that, save the last one, delete every other take. So it gives them no options in the edit where they have to go with the one that he feels like is right. So it's pretty wild to be like that. But Yeah, I think it's interesting that he's made those films. Like he made Seven, he made Fight Club, he made Zodiac, um, but he also made Benjamin Button, which I think is a really overrated film as well. Like it's kind of like the, I don't know, like a different era of Forrest Gump, but basically the same thing. Shows him going through all these famous events and stuff like that. Less like goofy, but it's just funny that Fincher made that as well to me, anyway. But again, like I've spent a lot of time in New Orleans, like wife's from Louisiana, and then my band used to play down there all the time, so we were just around it. So there's something about seeing sort of that landscape from a different era. But yeah, Fincher's one of my favorite directors. And he's doing the update to the Cliff Booth story right now with Brad Pitt. So like a continuation of the character he played in Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. Which is the best Alien franchise movie? It's a tough question. I think Default is the first one, just Alien. Um, However, I'm one of the few people I've encountered that likes Prometheus and Covenant. Um, I think that they capture what made Alien not just scary, but what made it sort of intense. I don't really like Aliens, the James Cameron one, even though I love Bill Paxton. It's like one of my all-time favorite actors. Uh, Mainly because what was so scary about the first one was that it was one alien. You get the one face hugger, and then you get the one xenomorph, and it terrorized the whole crew. And it was one of those things where you're scared more of what you're not seeing, and then when you do finally see it, it's more of like an action film than a thriller or a horror. Whereas in Aliens, there's like 1,000 of them, and they're able to just have the giant like future weapons. And even though most of them are toast in that one, it's still kind of like they wouldn't, by the same standards set by the first one, they wouldn't be able to last like that. Um, but I do think, I'm pretty sure that Aliens is where you get the classic Sigourney Weaver line, which is, uh, oh, what is it? It's when she's protecting Newt. And it always makes me, now that I know this story, it makes me think of Paul, the Simon Pegg and Nick Frost movie with Seth Rogen. Um, because Sigourney Weaver plays the big bad guy in that one. And Blythe Danner, which is Gwyneth Paltrow's mom, she plays someone that they wrote intentionally Sigourney Weaver's line from Aliens for her to say. And on set, Blythe Danner, she'd never seen Aliens, so she didn't know what it was supposed to sound like. And they actually ended up asking Sigourney Weaver, could you do a line reading so Blythe Danner knows, like, what that line is? And she was like, yeah, of course, it's great. Like, I thought that was really cool that she was game for that. But it's the part where, hopefully there's no young listeners or whatever, but the alien is like close to Newt and Aliens, and she's like, "Get away from her, you bitch!" And like, then I think she shoots her, hits her. I can't remember what it is, but it's kind of like the classic Aliens line. But otherwise, that movie's not great. Um, I'm a pretty huge fan of Prometheus, even though it got pretty, like, it got rocked by critics, and a lot of people always talk about how bad it is. Prometheus is kind of the perfect one, start to finish, other than Alien, the first one, for a few reasons. In the first one, if you've seen it and remember it well, the main reason everything goes totally wrong is because of Ian Holmes' character, who's the cyborg basically. He loses it. He goes nuts. He's programmed wrong or whatever, and so it makes everything go completely haywire. And it kind of sets the precedent for Prometheus and Covenant and all that to have Ian Holm lose it in the first one. How's it going, Rouge? Let's see. The scariest part of Alien was the eggs, where you know there could be thousands. Yeah, it's like the implication that might be a problem. But then with Bishop and Aliens, the second one, then they set the precedent there could be good cyborgs, because he kind of sacrifices himself to save Ripley. So it kind of sets up what makes Prometheus and Covenant so good, because you have David in the first one, who's played by Michael Fassbender. It's one of his best roles. And he plays that Ian Holm type where he is quietly losing it and intentionally not kind of, but sabotaging things. And I love that he's learning all the old movie quotes, and it's just he's a unique character. But then in Covenant, you have the follow-up, and you have Walter, who's the nicer version of him, who's mirroring Bishop from Aliens. But I think one of the best scary turns of any film in the last 20 years is in Covenant, which I have gripes about that movie. There are definitely things I didn't like about it, but in Covenant, spoiler, anyone who hasn't seen it and wants to go see it, turn off your volume right now, but it's at the end when he's putting them into cryo sleep, and I feel bad saying this because I don't want to ruin it for anyone. Hopefully everyone's seen it, but Walter and David have a fight where you don't see the end of it, so you kind of think, oh, it's David now. Like he's pretending to be Walter, but then there's moments where they make you second guess that, like, oh no, it is him. He did come back. And one of the greatest turns is in the end when he's putting what's her name, Samantha Waterston. I can't remember. I think that's the actress's name. He's putting her into cryosleep, and she says, "Walter, you'll still help me build the cabin by the lake." And he looks confused because he doesn't know the reference. And then she looks for a second at him, and then she starts crying, and she says, "David," and then he just puts her to sleep, and then turns on, is it Hall of the Mountain King? I can't remember what. It might be the Valkyrie. It's a great classical song, and then he starts regurgitating the xenomorph eggs. That whole thing is one of my favorite turns of any movie. I remember watching that for the first time and being excited because you know that turn's about to happen when she starts to look suspicious at him. One of the greatest. So I think that it's an unpopular opinion, but I think Alien is my favorite and the best. Then Prometheus, then Covenant. Then Aliens is fun, the second one, the James Cameron one, but it doesn't follow the same guidelines. It's an action movie. It's not a thriller or horror. And then I don't know. I mean, there's the one with Ron Perlman where Sigourney Weaver's character comes back as like a mix of a xenomorph, and they lost me there. Joss Whedon wrote that one, and I have many opinions about Joss Whedon in general. I've met him, and he was actually very contradictory to what he's been kind of publicly painted for. But that movie is just trash. It's so bad. It's one of the worst ones. I can't even really think about it. And then there's the Fincher one, where it has a couple redeeming qualities, but then overall, it's just such a bad movie. And it, I think, has more to do with the fact that the production company didn't trust him as a new director, and they just railroaded him and made him do all this stuff that he like wholeheartedly disagreed with. Um, but yeah, I'm a big fan of those in general. But I think that it's almost worth it now. Like the Alien Earth show is what it is. I know they're rewriting like original properties and stuff like that. And it's got a couple redeeming qualities, but so far I've been pretty underwhelmed. Um, it's it's I think probably going to be better when you can watch the entire thing and just binge it, because it doesn't feel like a episodic thing that I want to wait around for. Like it hasn't hooked me yet. Um, I think it is worth it to now go back and watch Prometheus, then Covenant, then Alien, and they do hold up despite the fact and the different qualities from film to digital and all that. I think that they did really well with that, you know. But also helps that it's the original director. He said the Alien Hybrid and Resurrection was the ugliest creature in cinema since The Troll and Big Trouble in Little China. Yeah, there's. I don't disagree with you. There's a few of them that are alarmingly gross. When I think of like ugliest creatures, I think of the husky monster and the Thing, the original, like the Thing, in my opinion. I don't know if you've seen that, but it's the John Carpenter film. Uh, that thing used to haunt me. And then, I mean, there's also the weird spider thing. And I was obsessed with the Thing for a long time. Um, that's one also, like, going back to what I was saying, not just earlier, but in a few of the other streams. I have moments from tours that I look back on as like greatest moments ever. Like, not even totally music related most of the time. And one of them was the first time I was in. So I've been in New York with a bunch of bands before, but it was the first time I ever got to just hang out for like a week in New York. And we went to get tattoos, and that tattoo artist was friends with our drummer at the time. It's a band where I played bass and sang. And we got our tattoos, and he was like, "Oh, you guys got to come to the barbecue tonight." And this all makes sense in a second. And basically, we got the tattoos, went and got food, picked up beers, and then we got to the barbecue, and it was on the roof of their building in Brooklyn. And where they were situated, if you look one way, it's the Manhattan skyline behind us. And then they had strung up a big sheet in between the roof access doors and reverse projected the Thing. So we like barbecued and like had this great view, and it was like a cold night, you know. And I already loved that movie, but it just kind of like locked it into my mind as one of my all-time favorites. But yeah, that movie with the husky monster and some of the stuff that's in there, it's a close rival to what you're talking about with the hybrid thing. Um, but yeah, I think every trip to New York since then has been a little bit of a letdown, because none of them have been quite that cool. Oh, nice. Yeah, the Thing is like, it's almost a perfect movie. I mean, I think that I have to go back and watch it and see. I don't think I have any gripes about it. It might actually be a perfect like cover to cover movie. I really hated when they redid it, because everyone kept saying it's not a remake, it's a sequel, and then it's like, wait, this is a remake. I'm watching it, and this is a remake, and it was so like unmemorable. But I'm a big fan of Kurt Russell in general. He's great in everything. Really liked it when he popped up as Ego in Guardians. Yeah, I think like it's something that I have to always take into account the experience of seeing the movie versus the quality of the movie. And there's some where I can unequivocally say, yes, it's better than I remember it, or it's worse, you know. Um, I've talked about it a lot, but like one of my favorite places to ever go is Alamo Draft House. There's a few locations in Austin that I really prefer because I lived there for 20 some odd years. And it kind of colors how you see a film because you get a whole menu of beer, you get a full food menu, you get everything you want there. You don't have to leave unless you got to use the bathroom. And then before every film, there's a 30-minute pre-roll of stuff related to what you're about to see. So if you're going to a Star Trek movie, it's a bunch of funny, like goofy, bad 60s sci-fi and like spoofs and things like that. And they're also incredibly strict about anyone getting their phone out. And like I'm never the type of guy that wants to ruin someone's experience, but if someone's talking or on their phone, I will literally be the first one to pull out a card and write that and tell them so they come and warn the person because I don't want the movie to be ruined, you know? I'm really like adamant about that. I feel like movie watching culture is sort of on its way out. Like people don't know how like theaters work anymore. But you also can pick your seating. So you can go online early and pick exactly where you want to sit. And so there's movies that I've watched where in retrospect maybe they weren't the greatest movie, but man did I have a good time. You know. And vice versa. Like movies that at the end of it it's like I've got to rewatch that. Like Inherent Vice was one of them. It's one of my all-time favorite films. And I saw it a few times in the theaters there. And it is great. It holds up. Still, every time I watch it, I notice a little detail I didn't catch before. Which, if you haven't seen that, it's worth watching. It's Joaquin Phoenix and Josh Brolin and Benicio del Toro. It's great. But yeah, I always think about that John Carpenter night up on the roof in Brooklyn because it's just like a hell of a way to see anything. Um, yeah, but going back to like the alien stuff, my brother and I were pretty obsessed with that when we were younger, and I'm not a big like horror or thriller guy in general. I have like some films that are kind of go-tos for like a scary film or uh yeah, Inherent Vice is crazy. It's a great cast. I mean, even the smaller parts in it are insane. It's Martin Short and Owen Wilson and um what's his name? Roberts. It's Julia Roberts' older brother. There's a bunch of people. I mean, it's star-studded. It's a great movie. One of Paul Thomas Anderson's best films. Uh, but yeah, in general, like scary stuff, I don't really gravitate towards. I'm more of like a Western, or I think we were talking about like historical type stuff. I like those more than anything. Um, but Alien is one that I'll always like those movies. If I'm ever in a hotel, if any Alien movie's on, I'm gonna watch it. Like despite any criticism I might have about them, I feel like it's just a franchise that even when done not as well as the other ones is still great. The concept of it, the scariness of it. Also, like I think it's one of those films where they really get you to hope that somebody's gonna get out. You know, you want them to survive. And they do a good job with like Prometheus and Covenant are a great example. You're not sure if you're supposed to like David and Walter, you know, and it's you want to because it's like charming and it's Michael Fassbender and he's kind of rude to people that you definitely don't like in the film, but then he's also kind of weird to people that you do like. Just sort of like a great way to subvert people's expectations and keep playing with the viewer a little bit. But yeah, I don't know. I think if I had to pick between the newer ones, I think Prometheus probably is the better film. I have one like really weird gripe about Covenant. It drives me crazy. They say Danny McBride's character's name too many times. They call him T in Tennessee like 1,000 times in that movie. and it drives me crazy. But I still like the movie. And Billy Crudup, you know, I mean, that's another one that's got a great cast. Um, kind of, yeah. Predator, I don't. It's not as like dear to me. I still love the original Predator. I saw every Alien versus Predator. I saw Predators, like where they film that, as a place where we actually used to go hike all the time. Um, it's like Marble Falls out by Austin. Um, I feel like they kind of mishandled that property. Like, I wish that they would stop making so many spin-offs of it. And Alien versus Predator, I don't know, in my opinion, I feel like logically the Predator would always win. Like, I know xenomorphs are tough, but it's like another tough alien with tech. It's like, I don't know. There's kind of a thing that I know I mentioned him earlier, and people don't like him anymore, but whatever. I've had good experiences with him. Joss Whedon talked about setting standards once you write, and I think that that's where a lot of films go wrong. Like, for example, in his in particular, like Firefly or Serenity, Mal's the baddest guy in the whole thing. His name literally means bad. Um, he is the anti-hero. So if you set that standard, you can't then have him easily beaten by every bad guy. You have to have some way to subvert that and still maintain that standard. And I think that when films really get it right, that's what they get right, and people don't realize it. It's kind of the same way with like how Star Wars has gotten so skewed and just doesn't have the impact it once had. It's because they set standards and they continually break their own standard. And I think Predator kind of fell like prey to that a little bit. Um, I still like Predator. I mean, but when I think Predator, I think of Arnold and mud and, you know, like smoking cigars in the jungle. Um, yeah, I think like where they truly lost me is when I think it's an Alien versus Predator. I think the Predator like gets sweet on one of the ladies or something, and he like breaks an alien thing and then makes a mark on her forehead, and it's like, yeah, but that's alien's blood. It would just burn right through her. Like, there's just things. It's like that standard being broken right there, even though it's a small detail. I literally remember that, and I haven't seen that movie in so long. But I feel like what Alien has that Predator doesn't is like the quiet menace of worry. Like, you know that the alien's going to get pretty much everybody. So I think that it's kind of almost a double feature, because that's what they did so right in Prometheus and Covenant, is that it's not just the alien you have to worry about. Like, if the alien doesn't get him, David will, you know, which I think is kind of a great, like, I think you forget about it, you know. A lot of people got lost in the narrative of Prometheus because it's got like the engineers and that whole storyline. I think people lost the point of that. That's what starts the story. So like, the xenomorph comes from David tracking all that down, essentially, you know, because he's figuring out their language and all that, and he understands it before everyone else, that it's essentially like a military installment, I think is what Idris Elba's line is. But yeah, Predator doesn't quite have that same thing, but they did a lot of good stuff in the Predator sequels. I just feel like they need to give it to somebody that truly understands setting the standard and maintaining it, because if not, it just all falls apart, you know. But like, speaking of like Star Wars, I'm one of the people that loves the first two, really. Jedi's all right. um I think Jedi is like seriously misunderstood. And even the title, most people think that it's referring to Luke. It's not. It's referring to Anakin, the Return of the Jedi. It's him coming back to the good side. It's not Luke. um they just assume that because of the opening of the film. He is returning to the film, but so is everyone else. So is Han, so is Leia. They're talking about Anakin coming back to the good side. Empire's the greatest. A New Hope sets up a lot of cool stuff, and it's a good film. But then you get to the prequels, and all of a sudden the standards are gone because Jedi is no longer a rarity. They're everywhere. So there's bad Jedis. There's like untalented Jedis. They broke their own standard there, whether he wrote that storyline first or not. He kind of ruins his own power there. Um, Also, he painted himself into a corner because of all the stuff about how there's only ever two Siths. It's like, well, there's not, because now you have all these, weird sub-standards of what that means. And I think where they really started to go wrong is when Disney really took it over. And they made it where a lightsaber going through someone no longer, like, has the impact that it used to. So they continue to break their own standard. And that's what I think made it less cool. I think that in the same way that Alien is scarier than Aliens, Star Wars was scary because of the terror that everyone felt when you start hearing Darth Vader breathing. It's the mystery of like this guy. Like I don't really like him in terms of comedy anymore. Like he's still funny every time he pops up in a show, but Patton Oswalt has this joke about if you ever bumped into George Lucas and he's like, "Oh, I love Star Wars." Like, "Oh, you'll be really happy we're making prequels." "Do you love Darth Vader?" "Yes." And he's like, "Would you like to see him as a kid?" "No. I don't want to see him as a kid. I want to be scared of him." Like he broke his own standards so many times that it just took the power away. But then once Disney took over, it got weaker and weaker. Like I think that in the same way that we were talking about the original Alien or um, The Thing, like things like that, they were terrifying. There's gross stuff there, but all you feel like you're there with them. Like when something gross happens, you feel grossed out by it. When something scary happens, you feel scared by it because you feel like you're in the whole situation with them. And they lost sight of that in films like Star Wars, where you no longer feel it's like you're watching planets explode from really far away, and then you're watching like multiple bases get destroyed that can destroy a planet. From it's like we get it, you know. That they lost sight of the fact that like the scariest scene in any Star Wars is probably an Empire when Luke walks into the cave and Yoda tells him you won't need your weapon, and he takes it anyway. And then all of a sudden Vader shows up. Like the terror of that as a kid was crazy. It's the one thing that they did really well in Rogue One is when Vader shows back up. It's like him in that scene. Hopefully, I'm not spoiling for anyone that's been out for a long time. The scene where his lightsaber lights up, even though it doesn't make sense because he lights it up in front of him and he's backlit with red light. It's like stuff like that. They need more like close terror where it feels like you need to get out but you can't. That's what makes Aliens scary. It's what made the first Predator scary. But I'm rambling for sure, but you know what I mean. It's there's like standards that have to be maintained for something to continually be menacing or scary or having those lasting effects. But yeah, I have many opinions about that type of stuff. That's pretty much like all I do in my downtime. Like when I'm done with this, I'm gonna go eat and watch a movie. I mean, like that's pretty much all I do when I have free time. And if I'm drawing and I'm not live streaming, I have a movie on in the background. Like most of my drawings, whether it's a painting or a drawing or anything, if you're on my YouTube or Instagram or wherever, if somebody points one out and asks what I was watching, I could tell you what I'm watching, and very rarely does it match the energy of what I was drawing. Like I drew and painted a little French bakery that was just a photo I liked, and I was watching Prometheus in the background the whole time. It's like this little dreamy sort of like mountain bakery in France, and I was watching terrifying stuff. Oh, right on. Fan of the Dark Tower. I read a little bit of that on tour years ago, and unfortunately, I need to revisit it. Um, the guy that pushed it on me was one of like the more annoying people I'd ever traveled with. I don't know that if anyone can relate, but when somebody I don't really click with tries to introduce something to me, I associate that thing with them, and I can't ever get into it. Like there's movies that people I really didn't click with on the road that they're like, you have to watch this. Like it's so like we thought you would like it when we watched it. I'll never watch those movies. Like even if I'm missing out. um, so I need to revisit it because it's something that I know I'd like because I do like a lot of his stuff. I mean, in general, I could talk. We're Dark Tower. We're talking about Stephen King, right? I'm double checking just to make sure I'm not rambling about the wrong thing. Um, I did watch like 20 minutes of that movie that they made, and I couldn't hang. They lost me, but apparently the movie was awful compared to the books. But yeah, I that's definitely on the list of things I need to revisit. I'm years away from when that was all going down. Um, in general, okay, right on. In general, like Stephen King, I have a lot of opinions about stuff that he's done. Something that I really like about him is that he has admitted multiple times when people had a better ending or better parts of a story he wrote. And I think that, and also, I mean, he hated the Shining movie. It's a great film, not at all like the book. Like there's TV movies that have been more accurate to it. Steven Weber, I think, the guy from Wings, he played Brian on Wings in the '90s. I think he played Jack in the TV movie. I remember being terrified on that one. Um, let's see. Yeah, like that movie, there were just things I didn't really understand that I felt like maybe I should read it before I watch this. Um, I also think, and I feel like I'm very qualified to say this because I'm from Texas and I feel like it gives me free license to criticize McConaughey. I love McConaughey when he's directed and written well, but when they give him a long leash, man, is it like torture. Um, in the same way that if I ever hear him in a podcast, the thing I think the whole time is he needs an editor. Like someone tell him to stop talking here. Please, I don't want to hear anymore. He's ruining every character that he's made. And I feel like that movie they gave him a little bit of like, you're McConaughey, do it, you know. And so he kind of maybe it's accurate to the character. It just didn't feel right when I started watching it, and I ended up turning it off. But Stephen King in general, I'm one of the few people that liked the Dreamcatcher movie. Like it was weird, it was dark, and then finding out what inspired that was what made me. It's like so funny that that's what the terror was behind it. Which I don't know if you know this, but he said once you get to a certain age, you're no longer worried about like things in the outside world. You're worried about things in the toilet, which is such a like weird Stephen King thing. Um, and that's where like the Jason Lee scene comes from is like a guy terrified of what's in a toilet. But I like the idea that Duddits was, if hopefully you've seen it, but I like the idea that Duddits was basically an antenna for all of what was going on and ended up being something like another great like subverting thing. Interstellar, yes. I'm not ashamed to say, even though it's like the classic guy my age answer, Interstellar is one of my all-time favorite movies. Um, there's like things that about that I really like. Kip Thorne, the physicist that was the advisor on it, said that um, the only thing he couldn't say would be plausible was the ice cloud. He was like, there's no way that physics could reconcile that. And Christopher Nolan said, well, that's okay. If that's the one thing we can't get by, then that's okay. Um, Interstellar definitely is his best role. His second best role is the first season of True Detective, the only good season. But a lot of stuff that he's done, I just feel like you can always tell when they let him, or when somebody's not telling him no. And I don't mean that in a mean way. It's just sometimes people get really sure of themselves, and it actually takes away from the magic that they're able to create when it's working well. I think also he had the accountability on True Detective of having Woody Harrelson there. So it's like he had a buddy that he's worked with for a long time that is like, don't do that. You know, there's like a standard that they're maintaining. I think it also helped that he's meant to be sort of like the quiet, pensive one of the two. Even though he talks a lot, he's kind of in his head, and the other guy's character is sort of taking the reins in terms of like where the story progresses. Um, Interstellar, I didn't predict the ending, but to be fair, I don't think a lot of people fully understood what the ending meant in terms of the science behind it. Kip Thorne explained all that, and he said that Christopher Nolan, when they were working on it, because I believe it's Nolan's brother that initially wrote the script and then they worked it out together, um, he said that they wanted a way for him to pass through the black hole. And he said, well, nothing, not even light, can really do that. And he said, what's a way that they could do that? And that's where the Tesseract came from. And he told them that originally it would need to be probably spherical, or it would, he explained all that. And he said, what if we did that, but it's cubic? And so he's the one that was like, oh, well, then it would have to be a Tesseract. It would have to be a cubed form spaceship, which is what he's in. So I don't think a lot of people knew that once he passes through the bulk, he's actually intercepted by a spaceship, and that's what he's floating around in where all the books are. I don't know that no one ever explained it, but Kip Thorne explains it in detail. Unfortunately, in an interview with Neil deGrasse Tyson where he didn't do his research, so the interview drives me nuts because he misunderstood the fundamental thing about the books. He kept saying, how would he know what the book titles are if he's speaking to her through the book titles? But he missed the whole detail somehow that it's Morse code, the dots and dashes. So he's not even looking, like he was focused on the wrong detail, so it kind of derails Kip Thorne's explanation. But knowing that, what I liked about learning that is that it didn't change anything. It just made it kind of make a little bit more sense to me. But also, just there's a ton of behind the scenes stuff on that film I really like. And the actor that plays Tars he's got such a kind of a wild, I don't know, like his whole film career has been wild. He was also in Elmo. He was Mr. Noodle. Like he's, always does like a bunch of physical comedy stuff. And then like Case, the guy that plays the other robot, he's one of Bane's main henchmen in Dark Knight Rises. He's the one in if you're looking him up or anything, this is stuff that I just catalog. I don't know why I retain it, but he's the guy that has the giant sniper rifle when Gordon goes down into the sewer. Like kind of towards the beginning of it, he's sort of soft-spoken. That's Case, the actor. Not his name, but the robot in Interstellar. So I always like it when directors kind of recycle actors that they work well with. Another great little plot twist of Interstellar, and it's something that I think it gets overlooked in terms of filmmaking. When they are in the big boardroom at NASA, they're talking about the greatest of them is Dr. Mann, and then they point at so different Mr. Noodle. There were two different actors. That guy actually passed away, and the guy who played Tars took over. That's also Edward Delacroix from Green Mile, the one that you're talking about. The guy with the mouse, the Cajun dude. Oh man, I lost. Oh yeah, so it's a great filmmaking trick. In Interstellar, without giving the whole thing away, they're talking about Dr. Mann after they show close-ups of other people's portraits, but when he points, it's Christian Bale, or not Christian Bale, I'm looking at my drawing. Michael Caine points at him and he says, Dr. Mann. That is a photo of Matt Damon from across the room. You just can't see it's him. So I think for a lot of people who went into it blindly and didn't look up the cast or anything, which is something I always try to avoid on films like that, when they unzip the bag and you find out that Dr. Mann is Matt Damon, I feel like it's a great little, not a like a gotcha or a twist or anything, but it's just sort of like a surprise that, oh wow, he's in this too. That's crazy. But I think also a lot of people were caught up with the fact that he had just made The Martian. Yeah, great film though. I think it gets kind of knocked a lot because it's sort of like every dude's favorite film right now. But it's great. There's a reason for it. I just realized we're like already past the 3-hour mark. I'm gonna go ahead and call it a night. I'm loving talking about films, and we'll always do that happily. But I'll be back on at 5 p.m. Pacific Standard Time tomorrow. I'll finish this one and then I'll start another one, which so far this is the fastest one I've done in this whole series. But tomorrow, starting tomorrow, we'll have 8 more days of live streaming drawing at 5 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, and then I'll be traveling for a few weeks, and I'll still go live, but it'll be at random times. So if you want to catch them, just like do all the YouTube stuff. But yeah, good talking to you, Travis and Rouge and everyone that was in here tonight. Thanks for watching. I'll finish this one, and then tomorrow I'll start another one. And as I start that, I'll let y'all guess and see if you can tell who it is. Right on. Okay. Have a good night, everyone.